My name is James Crawford. 6 months ago, I told you the first part of this story. How my brother Marcus and I found what we thought was an injured man in the woods of rural Maryland in 2003. How we brought him to our isolated property, treated his wounds, and discovered he wasn't human. How for 20 years we sheltered a creature we came to call August, a being that folklore calls Goatman, in the old barn on our family's 100-acre property. Part 1 ended with the question I'd been avoiding for 2 decades. Why did August stay? We'd never locked him in, never restrained him. He could have left any time. So why did a creature capable of tearing through steel doors choose to remain in our barn for 20 years, accepting food and shelter, existing in this strange symbiotic relationship with 2 human brothers? I told you then that the answer terrified me. That when I finally learned the truth, everything changed. That the secret August had been keeping was worse than anything I'd imagined. And that by the time we understood what he'd really been doing all those years, it was already too late to stop what he'd set in motion. This is part 2. This is what happened when we discovered the truth. This is the 6 months that destroyed everything my brother and I thought we knew about the creature we'd protected for 20 years. And this is why I'm warning you now, before it's too late, before what August started spreads beyond what we can contain. If you haven't watched part 1, stop right now and watch it. Because what I'm about to tell you won't make sense without understanding how we got here. How 2 brothers ended up in a situation so impossible that even now, 6 months later, I still can't fully process it. Before I continue, I need you to do something. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Part 1 reached millions of people. Thousands of you demanded to know what happened next. This is it. This is the rest of the story. And I need it documented because what we discovered about August, about what he was really doing in that barn for 20 years, it's not just our problem anymore. It's becoming everyone's problem. And people need to be prepared. Please share this. Because the secret August was keeping, the reason he stayed, it's spreading. And if we don't warn people now, before it reaches critical mass, then what happened to my brother and me will happen to communities across the country. Let me take you back to January 15th, 2024. 20 years and 3 months after we'd found August. Marcus and I were in our 50s now, had spent more than a third of our lives maintaining this strange relationship with a creature that shouldn't exist. We'd built our entire lives around protecting August's secret. Never married, never had children, never brought anyone to the property who might discover what was in the barn. It was a Wednesday morning. I was bringing August his breakfast, raw meat from a deer we'd hunted the previous weekend. He ate deer mainly, sometimes cattle we'd buy from neighboring farms and claim we were raising for ourselves. 20 years of feeding routines. 20 years of predictable patterns. I opened the barn door and immediately knew something was wrong. The smell hit me first. Not the usual animal smell we'd grown accustomed to. Something else. Decay. Sickness. Wrong. August was in his usual corner, the large stall we'd reinforced and expanded over the years to give him space. But he wasn't standing. He was curled up on the ground, shaking, making sounds I'd never heard before. Not quite words, but vocalized pain. Suffering. August. I called out, setting down the meat and approaching carefully. Even after 20 years, you didn't approach August carelessly. He'd never hurt us, but he was still 7 feet of muscle and horn and potential violence if spooked. He looked up at me, and I saw his eyes. They were different, clouded, unfocused, and his skin, normally a grayish-brown, looked mottled, discolored, like something was wrong underneath. I called for Marcus. He came running from the house, took one look at August, and went pale. Is he dying? I don't know. I don't know what dying looks like for something like him. We'd never called a veterinarian. How could we? How do you explain a 7-foot creature with goat legs and human torso to someone trained in normal animal medicine? So we did what we'd always done. Tried to figure it out ourselves. We spent 3 days watching August deteriorate. He stopped eating. Stopped moving. Just lay there, breathing shallow. Those clouded eyes staring at nothing. And he started making sounds. Not the grunts and vocalizations we'd heard before, but something closer to speech. Broken syllables. Attempts at words. On the third night, January 18th, Marcus and I were sitting with him. We'd brought blankets, water, everything we could think of to make him comfortable. And suddenly, clearly, August spoke. Not in English, but in something that sounded like words. A language we didn't recognize. He spoke for maybe 30 seconds, voice rough and layered, then went silent again. Marcus looked at me. Did you understand any of that? No, but I think he was trying to tell us something important. The next morning, August was different. Not better, but different. More alert. And when I came in with water, he looked at me directly and spoke again. This time in English. Broken, heavily accented, barely comprehensible, but unmistakably English. Not sick, he forced out, each word clearly agonizing. Changing. Changing into what? I asked. He gestured weakly toward the far corner of the barn. A corner we rarely went to, where we stored old equipment and hay bales. Look, Marcus and I went to the corner, started moving hay bales, and found what August had been hiding for God knows how long. A tunnel, dug deep into the earth below the barn floor, wide enough for August to move through comfortably. We got flashlights, looked down into the darkness. The tunnel extended far beyond what we could see, sloping downward, heading in the direction of the woods that bordered our property. How long has this been here? Marcus whispered. We looked back at August. He was watching us with those clouded eyes. Waiting. 20 years. I asked him, have you been digging this for 20 years? He nodded slowly. Why? Where does it go? He tried to speak, but couldn't form the words. Instead, he gestured. Come. Follow. See. Marcus and I looked at each other. We'd spent 20 years protecting August, trusting him, believing he was content to stay in our barn, live peacefully on our property. And all that time, he'd been digging, planning, preparing for something. We need to see where it goes, I said. Are you insane? We don't know what's down there. We don't know what he's been doing. We've trusted him for 20 years, Marcus. If he wanted to hurt us, he's had countless opportunities. He's trying to show us something important enough that he learned to speak English to tell us about it. Marcus didn't like it, but he agreed. We got ropes, more flashlights, emergency supplies. Told ourselves we'd just look, just see where the tunnel led, then come back and decide what to do. We climbed down into the tunnel. It was surprisingly well constructed, reinforced with wood and stone in places. Clearly the work of years of careful excavation. We walked for maybe 20 minutes, descending steadily, heading northeast toward the state forest that bordered our property. The tunnel opened into a cavern. Natural formation, but modified, expanded. And it wasn't empty. There were nests, dozens of them, made from branches, grass, cloth, arranged in a circle around the cavern. And in several of the nests, there were eggs. Large eggs, maybe 18 inches tall, mottled gray-brown, warm to the touch. Oh God, Marcus said. James, what are these? I already knew, already understood. August wasn't alone when we found him. He was scouting, looking for a place. And we gave him one. We gave him shelter, protection, time. 20 years to prepare this. We heard sounds from deeper in the cavern system. Movement. Multiple creatures moving in the darkness. And then they emerged. 5 of them. Smaller than August, maybe 5 or 6 feet tall, but unmistakably the same species. Same goat legs. Same elongated torso. Same horned heads. They saw us and froze. We froze. For maybe 30 seconds, we all just stared at each other. Then one of them spoke. In English. Clearer than August's speech, like it had been practicing longer. You are the brothers, it said. August's humans. He told us you would come. He said you could be trusted. Trusted with what? I asked, voice shaking. With the truth. With knowing what we are. What we've been doing. What's about to happen. Marcus grabbed my arm. We need to leave. Now. We need to get out of here and call someone, call the authorities, call. Call who? The creature interrupted. And tell them what? That you've been sheltering one of us for 20 years? That you've been complicit in our preparation? You're already involved, brothers. You've been involved since the day you found August and chose mercy over fear. Preparation for what? I demanded. The creature gestured to the nests, to the eggs. There are 37 eggs here. They'll hatch within the month. And this isn't the only site. We have 17 locations across Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, all prepared over the last 20 years. All protected by humans who found one of us injured or weak, who took us in, who sheltered us while we built these nurseries. My mind was reeling. You're saying there are other people doing what we did, other humans protecting you. 43 families, 43 humans who found one of our scouts, who chose compassion over fear, who gave us the time and space we needed. August is one of 17 scouts who succeeded. The others were killed by humans who responded with violence. But August found you, found brothers who were isolated, who were kind, who could be trusted. Trusted to help you do what? Marcus asked. What happens when those eggs hatch? What are you planning? The creature's expression, hard to read on that inhuman face, seemed almost sad. We're not planning invasion. We're not planning conquest. We're planning survival. Our species has been hunted to near extinction over the last 300 years. Killed by humans who feared us, who made us into legends and monsters, who couldn't conceive of coexistence. We've been hiding in the deepest places, dying slowly, losing numbers every generation. So you're using us, I said. Using human compassion to breed in secret. We're using the same thing that nearly destroyed us. Fear and compassion are two sides of the same instinct. Some humans respond to the unknown with violence. Others respond with mercy. We spent 20 years identifying which humans are which. And now we're betting our species' survival on the hope that there are enough of the merciful ones to protect our young until they can protect themselves. I felt sick. 20 years. 20 years of thinking we were making a choice, exercising free will, protecting a unique individual. And all along, we'd been selected, manipulated, used as incubators for something we didn't understand. August is dying, isn't he? I said quietly. That's what the changing is. He's dying because this was always the plan. Scout, establish a nest site, protect it long enough for the eggs to develop, then die. The creature nodded. Scouts rarely survive the transformation. Their bodies change to produce the chemical signals that trigger hatching. It's fatal. August knew this when he accepted the role. He knew he was trading his life for the survival of the next generation. And he knew he needed humans to protect that next generation during the vulnerable hatching period. Marcus was shaking. And you expect us to do what? Keep protecting this nest? Protect 37 newborn goatmen on our property? How? We can barely hide August. How do we hide 37? You don't have to hide them for long. 6 weeks after hatching, they'll be mobile enough to migrate to deeper wilderness, to join the others, to rebuild what humans nearly destroyed. All we're asking is protection during that vulnerable period. Food, shelter, the same kindness you showed August. And if we refuse? I asked. The creature looked at me with eyes that were far too intelligent. Then 37 young die. And our species moves one step closer to extinction. But we won't force you. August was very clear about that. You've given 20 years of your lives already. If you choose to stop now, we'll respect that. We'll do our best to protect the young ourselves. But survival odds drop significantly without human intervention during the hatching. We climbed back up through the tunnel in silence, returned to the barn where August was lying in his corner, weaker than before, but watching us with those clouded eyes, waiting to see what we'd decide. You lied to us, Marcus said to August. 20 years of lies. August struggled to speak. Not lies. Serve revival. Sami, as Yuh would do. And he was right. If human survival depended on deceiving another species, on using their compassion against them, wouldn't we do exactly what August had done? Marcus and I spent 3 days arguing. He wanted to call authorities, expose everything, let the government deal with it. I argued that would mean death for August, for the creatures in the cavern, for the eggs. That we'd be complicit in genocide. They manipulated us. Marcus shouted. They survived. I shouted back. Barely. By any means necessary. Same as any species would. On January 22nd, we made our decision. We'd see it through. Protect the nest through the hatching. Give the young the 6 weeks they needed. Then they'd leave, and we'd go back to our normal lives. It was rationalization. It was moral compromise. But after 20 years, we couldn't just abandon August in his final days. August died on January 29th. The transformation had consumed him from the inside. He passed quietly in the early morning, with Marcus and me beside him. We buried him in the woods beyond the barn, marked his grave with stones, and cried for a creature who'd used us, but who we'd loved anyway. 3 days later, February 1st, the eggs began hatching. We heard it from inside the house. Sounds echoing up through the tunnel. Cracking. Chirping. The sounds of new life. We went down into the cavern. The 5 adult goatmen were there, tending to the nests, helping the young emerge. And the young were beautiful, in their way. Small, maybe 2 feet tall, covered in soft fuzz, eyes huge and curious. They looked at us without fear. Some of them approached, touched our hands with small hooved fingers, made sounds that might have been greetings. And I understood why August had chosen us. Not just because we were isolated and kind, but because we were the type of humans who could look at something alien and unknown and see not a monster, but a child. See something worthy of protection. For 6 weeks, Marcus and I were part-time parents to 37 goatman young. We fed them, brought them meat and vegetables, watched them grow at alarming rates. The 5 adults taught them, communicated in their own language, prepared them for survival in the wild. But they let us be involved. Let us touch them, interact with them, become part of their early development. And slowly, my anger at being deceived faded. Because these young creatures weren't deceptive. They were just trying to survive. And the adults, including August, had done what they had to do to give their species a chance. On March 15th, the migration happened. The young were now about 5 feet tall, mobile, capable. The 5 adults led them out through the tunnel system, heading deeper into the state forest. They join others, form communities in the deepest wilderness, continue the slow work of rebuilding their population. Before they left, the adult who'd spoken to us that first day approached. Thank you, it said simply, for August, for the young, for choosing mercy when you could have chosen fear. We won't forget. What happens now? I asked. There are 17 nests. That's over 600 of you. Eventually, people will notice. Eventually, there will be sightings, evidence, conflicts. Yes, the creature agreed. Eventually, we'll have to reveal ourselves fully. Have to try to coexist openly rather than hiding. But now we have numbers. Now we have a generation that will grow up knowing some humans can be trusted. That might make coexistence possible. Or it might start a war, Marcus said. Perhaps. But extinction was certain if we did nothing. War is at least a chance. We'll take a chance over certainty. They left, disappeared into the forest. And Marcus and I were alone again after 20 years of never being quite alone. But it wasn't over, because word spread. The 5 other families in Maryland who'd been doing what we did, they found us. Wanted to talk. Wanted to process what they'd been part of. And through them, we learned the truth was even bigger than we'd thought. This wasn't just happening in the mid-Atlantic. This was nationwide. Goatmen weren't the only cryptid species using this strategy. There were reports of families who'd been sheltering Sasquatch young. Families protecting dogman dens. Families who'd found injured mothmen and nursed them back to health, only to discover they'd been facilitating breeding sites. It was coordinated. Multiple cryptid species, all on the edge of extinction, all using the same strategy. Find isolated humans. Test their compassion. Use that compassion to buy time and protection for the next generation. then reveal the truth and hope those humans would choose continued protection over betrayal. And it's working. Most of the families are choosing to keep the secret, to protect the young, to give these species their chance at survival. But not all. Some families felt betrayed enough to go public, to contact authorities, to expose what's been happening. Those families disappeared. Not violently, not dramatically. They just left their homes, relocated, never spoke publicly again. We don't know if they were threatened, paid off, or if they simply realized that exposing the truth would paint them as accomplices and chose silence over legal consequences. But the secret is failing. Too many nests, too many witnesses, too much evidence accumulating. Sightings are increasing exponentially. Evidence is becoming undeniable. And within the next few years, maybe the next few months, the revelation will be unavoidable. Multiple cryptid species exist. They're intelligent. They've been hiding and dying for centuries. And they've spent the last 20 years using human compassion to rebuild their numbers, using us as unwitting hosts for a survival strategy we never consciously agreed to. I don't know what happens when this becomes public knowledge. When millions of people learn that creatures they thought were myths are real, are intelligent, and have been secretly breeding in locations across the country with the help of dozens or hundreds of human families. Will people respond with wonder and compassion, or with fear and violence? Will governments try to protect these species, or eliminate them as threats? Will this be the beginning of coexistence, or the beginning of a war that makes the last 300 years of cryptid hunting look merciful by comparison? I don't know. And that terrifies me more than anything August ever did. My name is James Crawford. For 20 years, I sheltered a Goatman named August. I thought I was making a choice. Thought I was exercising compassion. Instead, I was part of a coordinated survival strategy spanning multiple species and hundreds of human families. August used me, but he also trusted me. And in his final days, he gave me the truth. Not because he had to, but because he believed I deserved to know. Believed Marcus and I had earned honesty through 20 years of care. I can't hate him for that. Can't hate any of them. They're fighting for survival, using the only weapons they have: intelligence and hope that not all humans are monsters. The secret is out there. The eggs have hatched. The young are growing. And within a few years, the revelation will be complete. Multiple intelligent species emerging from hiding, hoping for coexistence, prepared for war if that's what we choose. I'm telling this story because people need to prepare, need to understand what's coming, need to decide now before the crisis whether they'll respond with compassion or fear when the truth becomes undeniable. Part 2 of my story isn't about deception. It's about survival, about difficult choices made by desperate species, and about the question that will define the next chapter of human history. Can we share this planet with other intelligent beings? Or will we prove that August and his kind were right to hide from us for 300 years? I'm not using my real name. I can't. Not after what happened. Not after what I learned about my family. Not after the government made it very clear that silence was my only option if I wanted to keep living a normal life. But staying silent is killing me. The weight of this secret, the knowledge of what my grandfather did, what my father continued, what I discovered in the dark beneath our farm, it's too much. Someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand that the stories we tell ourselves about monsters are sometimes backwards. Sometimes the monsters are us. My family owned a dairy farm in rural Wisconsin for 4 generations. 200 acres of pasture land, a century-old farmhouse, barns that had weathered more winters than I've been alive. The Hendricks Farm. My great-grandfather bought it in 1947, fresh back from the war, looking for peace and a place to raise his family. What he found there, what he discovered in those woods at the edge of the property, changed everything. Changed our family. Changed what we believed was possible. And eventually, it brought men in dark suits to our door with orders that couldn't be refused. Before I tell you what was hidden beneath our land for over 70 years, I need you to do something. If you want to know the truth, if you're ready to hear about the thing my family protected and the price we paid for that protection, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. This story needs to exist somewhere beyond my own haunted memory. So please, subscribe, and let me tell you about the secret that lived in our basement. I grew up on that farm. My childhood was normal, or what I thought was normal. Chores before school, helping with the cows, learning to drive a tractor before I could legally drive a car. My father was stern but fair. My mother was quiet, always watching, always listening. And my grandfather, he lived in the old farmhouse with us until he died when I was 15. He was the one who taught me about the farm, about the land, and about the rules we never broke. There were 3 rules in our house that were absolute, sacred, never discussed, only enforced. Rule 1. Never go into the old root cellar beneath the house. Rule 2. Never talk about strange sounds you might hear at night. Rule 3. Never, under any circumstances, tell outsiders about family business. I followed these rules without question. Every farm family has their quirks, their odd traditions. I assumed ours were no different. The root cellar was accessed through a heavy door in the kitchen floor. Thick oak reinforced with iron bands that looked like they belonged on a medieval dungeon. My father kept it padlocked. 3 separate locks, actually. Different keys, different combinations. I'd asked about it once as a child. My father's face had gone hard in a way I'd never seen before. That cellar keeps things in, he'd said, and keeps things out. You don't go down there, ever. Understand? I understood. I never asked again. But I heard things. At night, lying in my bedroom on the 2nd floor, I'd hear sounds drifting up through the floorboards. Scratching, movement, and sometimes vocalizations. Low and rumbling, not quite animal but not quite anything else. My mother would turn up the TV. My father would check the locks. And we'd all pretend we heard nothing. The first time I saw my grandfather cry, I was 12 years old. It was late autumn, November I think, and he'd been down in the cellar. He did that sometimes. Disappeared for hours with food and water and medical supplies. When he came back up, his eyes would be red and distant. That particular night, I'd woken up to use the bathroom and found him sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Grandpa," I'd whispered, "are you okay?" He'd looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "You look like her," he'd said. "Same eyes. Same kind heart. I hope you never have to make the choices I made." "Who do I look like?" "Someone I couldn't save." He'd wiped his eyes. "Go back to bed, son. Some stories aren't for children." I learned the story 3 years later, the night before he died. He'd called me to his room, his breathing labored, his body finally giving out after 8 decades of hard living. My parents were downstairs. It was just us. "Jacob," he'd said, using my real name, the name I can't use anymore. "I need to tell you something. Your father knows. When I'm gone, he'll continue. And one day, you'll have to decide if you will too." Decide what? Whether to keep a promise I made in 1952. A promise to protect something that saved my life. He told me the story then. Told me about the winter of 1952, one of the worst on record. He'd been working the north pasture, checking fence lines, when a blizzard rolled in faster than anyone predicted. He'd gotten turned around in the whiteout, lost his bearings. The temperature dropped to 20 below. He knew he was dying. Hypothermia was setting in. He'd fallen in the snow, couldn't get up, was starting to drift off into that final sleep. That's when it found him. A creature he'd only heard about in old Native American stories his grandfather had told. The Wendigo, some tribes called it. The Dogman, others said. A beast that walked like a man, but had the head and instincts of a wolf. It should have killed him, should have torn him apart. Instead, it picked him up and carried him. He'd been barely conscious, but he remembered being carried through the storm with impossible strength and speed. Remembered being brought to a cave, a natural formation at the edge of our property. Remembered the creature building a fire, keeping him warm, bringing him water. For 3 days, the storm raged. For 3 days, this impossible thing kept him alive.